Well, welcome everybody. My name's John Byrne. I'm the founder and editor of poetsandquants.com. We have a good group of you out there, and we're eager to start our webinar. So we are basically here with, so they really have the inside skinny of what happens to an application when it arrives at London Business School, at INSEAD, at Duke, at UCLA, and NYU Stern. And today we're going to be talking really about round 2 strategies and how to deploy your strategy to apply to an elite school in the second round, now that round 1 is quickly coming to a close. So let me just briefly introduce everyone here. We have from London Cassandra Pittman, who, if you have your webcams on, you can see on your screen is all the way to your left. Cassandra used to work at London Business School and INSEAD, so she knows those two schools, clearly the two best schools outside the U.S. by far, really well. We have Catherine Tuttle, who had worked as an associate director of admissions at Duke's Fuqua School of Business, and she's coming to us from Raleigh, North Carolina. Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
We have Jessica in the next panel, and Jessica had worked at UCLA as a senior associate director of admissions at the Anderson School of Management. Hi, Jessica. Not surprisingly, she's in LA. And then last but not least, we have Dina Glasofer, who is the former Senior Associate Director of Admissions at NYU Stern. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
So let's just go with this. You know, how does the competition in round 2 differ for MBA applicants than, let's say, round 1? Who wants to go first with that?
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that. I think it's important to understand that the competition is still quite tough in round 2, right? So you have candidates who in round 1 may be getting waitlisted, may have been denied. They're starting to cast a wider net. So you are competing with some folks who have already applied in round 1. And I think, at the same token, it also can be a benefit to some people to apply in round 2 because it gives you some extra time to really delve into the culture of the school, really understand your fit, and it gives you the opportunity to really showcase that in a way that sometimes can't come across in round 1 when the deadline is much quicker. So, you have the opportunity to stand out if you approach it in the right way. It's also because of the number of applications that come in round 2, it can be beneficial for people who maybe don't have the ideal background, right? So there's something in your background that makes you a little bit nervous or maybe not the perfect candidate on paper. This can be a good time, again, to really showcase the fit and the purpose behind the MBA.
Anyone else on this? Is it different in Europe, for example, round 2?
I think the same things hold true pretty much across all the schools, right? You're entering a larger pool, so that needs to be kept in mind. But on the other hand, as I always say, the most important thing is to apply when you're ready and your application is the strongest it can possibly be. And for a lot of people, that does mean applying not in round 1 but in round 2. I went to Columbia Business School, which is on for my MBA, which is on a rolling admission, and the other key advantage there, or difference I should say, not advantage, was in their early decision, which is sort of roughly equivalent to another school's round 1. They actually, they have you sign an honor code that if you're offered acceptance, you will take it. So for people who potentially are applying to Columbia who it might not be their top choice or they're not 100% sure what their top choice is, this is about the time they should be thinking about applying to Columbia.
So let me, actually, I've always been curious about that, Cassandra. Do you know what the acceptance rate in that early decision round is at Columbia versus the overall acceptance rate?
No, I don't know. I don't know that, and I'm not sure that those who do will tell anybody.
It's got to be higher,
They
though,
do
significantly higher.
potentially. What they say is that the vast majority of their offers go out in regular decision. So, and the vast majority of the class is shaped in regular decision, and so they really try to push the message that they, apply an early decision if Columbia is the school that, is in your heart, that you just, you're going to cry for days and days if you don't get in. It's your one and only school. That's who they want applying in the early decision, and maybe because of that, I think it would be a good hypothesis that the offer ratio would be higher in early decision, but that would probably be because people can really demonstrate their passion for the school.
Right. Now, it's commonly believed that because round 2 tends to be the biggest round, accounting for anywhere between half and, let's say, 40% of the school's applicants, that you're a little bit disadvantaged. And, Catherine got into this a little bit with the sense that, look, in round 1, every seat in the class is open, and then you also, have to compete against a waiting list in round 2, not only the people who got offers in round 1. So are you, in fact, at a competitive disadvantage in round 2, or is that really not true? I mean, when you listen to admissions directors, they'll say, oh, no, you have the same choice, the same chance of getting in. But is that really true, Jessica?
Well, I mean, for us at UCLA Anderson, we got the majority of our applications in round 2, and that's always historically been the case. And I think, like you mentioned, John, a lot of schools get big bulk of their applications at that time. So we have that historical data going into evaluations and knowing kind of a ballpark of what to expect for each round. So I don't think it was necessarily way more competitive in round 2 because we knew that there was going to be a lot more applicants in round 2. So we kind of had an idea of how much space would probably get filled in that time. But that being said, I think we have such a huge volume of applications to read in a limited amount of time to get the decisions out on time that I think it's really important to be very strategic and make sure that you really craft an application that's balanced and not just focus on maybe one area. You don't want to come across as just one-dimensional, so you really do have to think about ways to really make your application pop because there's such a huge volume of applications and evaluations that the admissions committee is going through.
Right. And Dina, at NYU, what was your sense of the competitive advantage, disadvantage, or how neutral it was to apply in round 2?
Yeah, I would say there wasn't a huge difference between round 2. Stern actually does, they're a little unusual. They have kind of 4 rounds. They have like an early October deadline, November, January. So, just careful when you hear about round 3 and 4. It's a little different for them.
Right.
But Stern, I would say, did get steady numbers of applications round 1. Round 2, I would say there was not a disadvantage applying by the January deadline relative to the first deadline. One thing to keep in mind, though, with a lot of schools, especially a school like Stern, a lot of times we would see applicants who maybe had applied to a school like a Stanford or a Wharton or somewhere else, and in round 1, and then there are certain schools where a lot of times they don't get in round 1. There's an increase in applications for the January deadlines. So that's what I think a lot of schools sometimes see as well.
Now, I'm curious, how big is the wait list overhang from round 1 into round 2 at the schools where you've worked and are familiar with the process? And I know, of course, the wait list is going to vary in size from year to year, but I think it typically is within a certain range, just like GMAT scores are. So to just help our audience understand how many people are likely to be put on the wait list at NYU, at Stern, at UCLA, at Duke, and at LBS and NCI.
For Stern, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. Sorry.
I actually don't know the answer to that.
You don't
either.
know?
Sorry. No.
I think that, I know, having been on both sides of this coin, I know that it feels reassuring if you can get numbers like that to say, well, you know, there's going to be 100 people on the wait list, but and it's really frustrating when you get vague answers, but this is one of those areas where when admissions directors are out on their circuit and they say it varies from year to year, it varies from round to round, it really is true. You know, I mean, one year you can have a lot of people on a wait list because of the factors of the number of applications that you've had and what you're anticipating, or there's a number of people that you want to give the benefit of the doubt to, you want to see how well they do on the GMAT when they retake it. Could be lots of different things. And so what I'd say is that if you are looking at applying now, this is not where you should spend your intellectual energy worrying about these things. You should spend it all on making your application as good as it can possibly be for each school, because that's the only thing that matters.
So what's the best strategy to employ if you're going to apply in round 2?
Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, it's hard when we have 4 people that all can talk to this. I think that a great strategy is to start early as possible. You know, you've got most of these deadlines in early January, so you've got some time. And as we've all talked about, making sure that your application is, you know, as dynamic as it can be and that it pops. You know, a lot of that is going to be you taking the time to really dig deep from a self-assessment standpoint, right, and really understanding what your strengths are and your values and your motivators and the reasons for going to business school, and then connecting those to the schools for which you're applying very, very clearly and concisely. And part of doing that is self-assessment. The other part is connecting with people who are at those schools and who have been at those schools to really understand beyond a surface level and what you can find on their website, you know, what it really means to be a Duke MBA, part of Team Fuqua, part of, you know, the culture at these different schools. And so I think, you know, the self-assessment piece is going to be key, as is the outreach to students and alumni of those schools. And in this day and age with LinkedIn, you know, it's so easy to find these connections. So if you're not doing that and you're not utilizing you know, these connections to these schools, it's going to be hard to make your application stand out.
Right. And Jessica, you wanted at this question as well, so why don't you go for it?
Sure. Especially, I guess, for those who've applied to some round 1 schools already, I think sometimes you have to take a step back and then reassess what your strengths are, how you've progressed, you know, since you've submitted the round 1 applications too. So I would say to take stock of any progression, any changes, since, you know, even though it's just a really short window of time, there could have been a promotion up in there, there could have been something that you want to make sure to add into your round 2 applications instead of just kind of rushing to get them in by the deadline. So take stock of some of those and make sure that you do additional self-reflection, just like what Catherine was saying. By round 2, you know, it's kind of, I think for me, I always thought, okay, there's been a little bit more time for you to do your research. You know, the students have been back in school for a couple more months. There's been more time to do some outreach, to talk to staff, to members of the community. So really taking that time to get to know the people at the schools that you're interested in, I think it's going to be important, because you could also add that insight into your applications, into your essays, in your interviews. And I think that that's really going to help to make you stand out and show genuine, authentic interest in the programs. So really taking that time to do that additional research. I also think maybe by the time you're thinking about round 2 schools, or hopefully you have some schools you know, on your radar at this point that you're serious about, but also as you're applying, you might get some updates from the schools you applied to in round 1. So you might have gotten admitted, or maybe you were not admitted. So especially if you're not admitted, it's probably a good time to start diversifying your options at that point. There's tons of schools out there that have probably, you know, lots of things that you're looking for in business school, whether it's the culture, the community, career opportunities, whatnot. So make sure that you also kind of look at the diversity of options that are out there, and to connect with those schools as well, and to do that as soon as you get feedback, because then, you know, that just gives you more time to submit your application, to work on and submit your application.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, if I could just add to that quickly as well, just building upon that point, Jessica, you know, especially if you're not, you haven't been invited to interview, or you're getting less than positive responses from your round one schools. I think one key aspect to the strategy is that you must seek feedback from other people on your application so that you can understand where you went wrong. What is it? Is it that you should retake the GMAT? Is it that you don't have enough work experience? Or is it just that, you need to tighten up your narrative and do a bit more self-reflection? So whether that be with a coach or whether it be with, if you have people in your personal or professional network who have done MBAs, who you can trust to give you that kind of feedback, that I think that must be a critical part of your round two strategy if you have not gotten positive results in your round one strategy.
Now, schools are very focused on what's called yield, which is the percentage of admits who actually enroll in a program. And it's often said that if you apply in later rounds and your application is really super good, a school may think that you applied elsewhere and either were rejected, or they may feel, in other words, that they're a second choice. So after like an early decision at Columbia or Duke, how do you convince a school that you really are motivated to go there?
Yeah,
Dina, you want to take that? Or Catherine?
Yeah,
Sure.
go.
You can start off, Catherine. I'll add something. You don't know.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I think we touched on this a little bit already, but I think, especially at a school like Duke, where the focus and the culture is so much on collaboration, I think they really want to know that people want to be there, and a big part of that is the outreach, right? So they want to see that you have connected to students. They want to see that you've connected to alumni, and they want to see those people recommend you. They have processes, for those people to formally submit recommendations on your behalf. So it's not just, talking to these people one time and using that to help frame your essay, which you certainly can't do, but following up and showing appreciation, and if they recommend you speak to someone, doing that and then following up with them and letting them know, and those are the types of things that will lead to an online recommendation, an outreach to someone in admissions, and that goes a long way. It shows that this is a purposeful application on your part, that you're going the extra mile to make sure that you fit in with Team Fuqua, and that you're going to be someone who contributes in the short and long term.
Dina?
Yep, and just to add to that, Stern in particular, and I know a lot of other schools offer different opportunities when you're on campus or to go and visit on campus. If we were reading an application and saw that somebody did not take advantage of any of the opportunities that were available and just showed up for the interview, the question is going to be why? Why didn't they, when they were invited to come and sit in on a class visit, why did they turn that down? So again, any opportunities that you get emails about, at least attend some of them to be able to show that you are really investing the time, getting to know the program. And I would also say when we read the essays are definitely an opportunity to be very specific about the particular school you're applying to. It was always very obvious when, I would read an essay, my colleagues would read an essay, and it looked like it could have been a generic essay that was cut and pasted for different schools just with the name, and occasionally the name wasn't even changed, but yes, so be careful. But again, you do have opportunities with the essays, so spend the time researching the school, following student blogs, again, just getting to learn as much about the program as you can so that when you have opportunities to explain why you want to go there, you're able to incorporate those.
I'm just going to remind our audience too that they can type a question into the box and send it to us, so that when we finish our discussion, we'll open it up for a Q&A. So if you get your questions in early, you probably have a better shot at getting them answered on the webinar. So is there an optimum number of schools to apply to in any given round?
I can respond to that. Yes, so there's not one magic number, magic formula for each applicant. I would say there are a number of factors you want to take into consideration. Number one, if you're still taking the GMAT and you're not sure what your score is, or you've taken it and you want to retake it, you don't want to be applying to 4 or more schools for a particular round because you might be spending time on the weekend still preparing for that. It's much more important that the quality of your applications be very strong. I do get concerned, when we have applicants that want to apply to 3 or more schools all for the same round, because again, they're working full-time, things might come up at the last minute, and you want to make sure that they're aware of how much time it takes. A lot of times I like working with clients when it's 2, possibly up to 3 schools per round, but again, just be very careful that you don't spread yourself too thin by applying to too many schools for 1 round.
So do all of you basically believe that more than 3 gets you into a zone where you might get careless and a little sloppy, or what?
Yeah, that, and I think it can be tough on your recommenders. So, that's a lot to manage when you've got, 4 or 5 schools that you're trying to tailor your application, and then you've got 4 or 5, recommendations that need to be done to people for each school. I mean, it's a lot to keep up with, and it's a lot to ask of someone to write that many recommendations within a relatively short amount of time. So that's just another factor to consider.
Is it too late?
Can I add just one quick? Just keep in mind too, for round 2 with January deadlines, that's around the holidays, and I think that's something that a lot of times gets overlooked, and someone thinks, oh, I have 2 or 3 weeks for my recommenders, and all of a sudden they're on vacation. So factor that, and definitely reach out to your recommenders early.
Okay, it's October. Is it actually too late to apply in round 2? Anybody?
You mean right now?
Yeah, like in other words, if you have nothing but a GMAT score from, let's say, a year or 2 ago, or maybe earlier this year, and you've done nothing so far to actually apply, can you actually get it done in time for 2, 3, maybe 3 schools?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think so. So it definitely has to be on the top of your priority list. So if that means foregoing maybe some social life, maybe that has to be the case. But I mean, this is your future, and this could be your next big step in your in your career development, in your professional life. So I think it's worth that sacrifice. But yeah, you can now is prime time. All students are here, are back on campus. There are so many opportunities for admissions events and class visits and connecting with with the community. So I think there is still a lot of time to be able to at least start forging those connections. But you have to be very strategic, and you have to be really have to sit and put together a timeline. If you need help with that, definitely, like, we're here to help with just working with you through the process. And you also have to make sure that you plan accordingly. So including the outreach, you have to really start to look at your essays. You have to do all the self-reflection, think about why you're going back to school, what you want to get out of the program, what you want to do with your career, thinking about who you want to get as your recommenders. But I think that if you really put in the time and the energy, and you make this a priority, you can absolutely get it done. You just have to make sure that you do plan, and make sure that you understand that there are other things in your life that are going on, whether it's work, whether it's the holidays coming up, whether it's all these other activities that you have going on. So it is very important to be able to think about all these things holistically.
But an ideal timeline, what would an ideal timeline look like in comparison to starting today and getting 3 ready for round 2 deadlines? What would the ideal timetable look like?
John, when I worked in INSEAD, I remember it was in my first couple of weeks that I was working there, and I was talking to a student, and I asked him, why did you choose a 1-year program over, or even it was a 10-month program over a 2-year program? And he said, I think things take as long as you give them. You give it 2 years to sort your life out, it takes 2 years. You give it a year, it takes a year. And I think it's a similar thing with the MBA applications. You know, if you give it 6 months or a year, it'll probably take that long to get your narrative down, to understand your motivations, to research the schools. I think if you give yourself 2 or 3 months, you can do it in that amount of time, and if you're really dedicated, you can do it in 4 to 6 weeks. So I think sometimes longer isn't always better.
Right. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. Now, each of you have touched on this in one way or another, but let me ask the question more directly. What's the best advice you can give to help an applicant stand out in that big pile of applications in round 2?
I can go first
Catherine?
if you want.
Oh, Cassandra, okay.
Yeah. So I think that what I see the most in working with clients and friends and having been on, again, in admissions is people who, they're so concerned with telling the admissions committees what they think the admissions committees want to hear, that their essays become, not just their essays, the entire application becomes a little sporadic, it's pulled in lots of different directions, there's not a clear narrative, they're trying to like pack so much into every question. And I would say my single biggest piece of advice, no matter which round, is, you know, get the basics right. Your GMAT's got to reflect your true capabilities. You know, you have to give your recommenders enough time and all of that. But really work on building a solid narrative. Really understand your strengths, how you fit into the school, why you fit into the school, what you have to give, what you have to get, and build that narrative through every single aspect of your application. And that takes communications discipline. It's hard to do on your own, but I think it's where people really fall down, and it's how they can best stand out.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, to add to what Cassandra was saying, I think it's really about creating a, in terms of letting the admissions committee know who you are. So sometimes I see folks that are too caught up on the numbers. Oh, my GMAT is not high enough, or my GPA is low, or I only have 2 years of work experience. And rather than just focusing on just those kind of quantifiable pieces of information, it's all about putting together a very comprehensive perspective of who you are. It is a holistic, it really genuinely is a holistic application review process for, I would say, almost all schools. So people want to know how you can contribute to the community, how are you going to fit into the culture, what is something interesting about you. The admissions committee is crafting a class, so they don't want everyone who has the same background, who is going to want to do the same things. They're just not going to enhance that learning community. So you really want to, I think, play to your strengths. Think about maybe areas that are pretty unique about yourself. So if you come from a non-traditional background, maybe play up to that, how you can enhance the community, bring in a different perspective into problems and solutions. If you have some interesting experiences, life experiences, international perspective, volunteer work, maybe you have a vision for something really cool that you want to do in the future, I would say tie those in, like Cassandra said, into your narrative. So not that it doesn't, don't just kind of slot these things in just to try to, showcase how cool and different you are, but really it's all about how to thoughtfully integrate these pieces of information about you, because you do have a limited amount of space to be able to convey who you are as a person, and to really make yourself, kind of stand out in this sea of applications, as you're, especially round 2, because again, the volume is so high.
Yeah, I think that self-assessment and really making it clear that you understand why you're getting an MBA, what you bring to the table, but also what you need to learn, and then why that school, right? So why an MBA and why Fuqua, why NYU, why UCLA, and making sure that theme, goes throughout, and that the theme aligns with their mission and their values. So when you look at a school like Fuqua, where we care quite a bit about, again, collaboration, when there's a huge focus on international exposure and diversity, then those themes need to come through in your application, and you need to be clear how you've had that experience in the past, how it's benefited you, and how you want to build on that within the program.
So a question came in from the audience, and it's kind of like the flip side of what we've just been discussing. What are the kind of things that essentially you should avoid in round two? Sort of what mistakes are commonly made?
I can start off. Yeah, so there's a lot of different mistakes. Some of the more common ones, again, are just not being clear about the particular schools that you're applying to, or where it comes across as, this is something that's generic and, like it was an application that was written for another school. I would say, too, another common mistake is just kind of being on the surface when you submit an application, where if somebody reads it and they feel like they don't really get a sense of who you are as a person, what's important to you, and maybe you're just writing things that you've seen online or buzzwords, but it doesn't tell us, well, why did they do this? Why did they pick this career? Why did they want to go into this? So again, having an application that just isn't letting the reader get to know who you are as a person, to understand what drives you, what motivates you, and again, why that particular school is a good fit for you.
Right. Anyone else?
I think, not fully preparing your recommenders is a big mistake as well. So, oftentimes, if you're not kind of giving them the information that they need to write an effective recommendation, the themes that you're highlighting, the strengths that you feel you bring to the table, why an MBA, examples of you adding value to the organization, then they can stay very high level, and that doesn't do a whole lot to, drive this home, right, when they're putting everything, the entire package together. So I think really sitting down with them and helping them understand why you're doing this, why the MBA, why school, and then giving them, what they need to then write an effective recommendation for you.
Let me come back to something else that all of you seem to agree to, that demonstrating an interest in the school by interviewing alums, perhaps students, visiting the campus, is an important part of the process. What about the international student who frankly can't get to campus? Does that put that person at an advantage or disadvantage in the application process?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, John. Yeah, I was just going to say, so at INSEAD and LBS, because the classes there are 70 to 80% international. This was a common thing, and even if the school did come and do an information session, you weren't always available on that day. You don't always have the financial means to get to that major city. There's lots of different reasons somebody can't. But I think that what admissions committees want to see is that you've made the efforts that you can reasonably make. That you've gone a little bit above and beyond. We weren't your first Tinder swipe. That you took the time to read our profiles and get to know us, right? And that's what's important. And the truth is, and I think Catherine made this point beautifully, with LinkedIn, all the different technology we have now, it's very, very rare that somebody isn't 2 or 3 degrees separated from an alum of the school, somebody connected to the school. And it's totally fine in your application to say, I live in India, I live in China, I wasn't able to get to campus, I wasn't able to attend an MBA fair, but I was able to speak with this person and that person, and they really enthused me about the school for these reasons. This is why I think I would be a good fit. But,
yeah.
you do have to put in some legwork.
Right.
I was just going to add that a lot of schools like UCLA, Anderson in particular, a lot of their students are kind of tasked with the responsibility of helping to bring in the next generation of students. So one of the mandates, as a part of the community, is to be an ambassador. If someone contacts you to answer questions, you can be the first point of contact, and you can basically make or break someone's opinion or perspective about about the school. So, you know, a lot of the club officers, part of their responsibilities are also to, you know, to field questions from prospective students. And so regardless of where you are, you know, you can reach out to anyone from, any of the students from anywhere around the world, and they're happy to answer your questions or point you to a resource. If they don't know the questions, they might connect you to another student or a faculty member or someone from an academic center. So I think there's really no reason now to not be able to find some sort of connection because we are so, because of technology, because of the openness of schools to want to share their communities and to let people get to know them.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too that this isn't just emailing a list of questions to someone, right, and asking them to respond, which we see too often, right? I mean, you with FaceTime, with Google Hangout, with you know, Skype, phone. I mean, there's a lot of different ways for you to have a meaningful connection with this person and actually have a conversation. And so, you know, respect their time, I think, and make sure, you know, you're reaching out to people that have some sort of, you know, similarity beyond just the school. So is their background in a similar area? Are they from a similar part of the country? That type of thing. And then ask good questions in person and not just send them a laundry list.
Yeah.
Right.
And John, if I can also add, you know, we're framing this as this is what you should do to make your application as strong as it can be so that you convince the business schools that that you're right for their community. But this is actually, I would say, you know, this is what you should do to make sure that you're choosing the right school for you. You know, is making sure that you feel that the people that you meet are the kind of people that you want in your network. They're the kind of people you'd want to call your friends for the rest of your life because that's really what it's about. That is what a building a network and a lifelong network is about. So this is work you should be doing not just to make your application great, but to make sure that you're making the right decision for the rest of your life.
Right. Now, tomorrow is a big day for a lot of people in the admissions world. Tomorrow is the third and last day for round one notifications at Harvard Business School. And you already have a lot of people freaking out because the theory is the bulk of those invites for interviews went out on the first day. Then there was a batch that went on the second day. So what's actually going to come on the third day is likely to be very few invites, a number of people put on the wait list, and the vast majority of people rejected. So here's a question from our audience, not necessarily about that, but about being rejected. If you get rejected from your target school, the school you've dreamed of attending, how likely is it that you could be accepted as a reapplicant in the following year? Anybody?
I can start off. Yeah. So, you know, it's hard to answer, you know, with the percentage. Every individual is different. One of the first things you want to do if you've been rejected is to understand why. What aspect of your application was weak, or, you know, there was obviously something. So that's kind of the first step. So, you know, you can start out by just, you know, obviously looking surface level at the class profile. Were you competitive with your numbers? But beyond that, there's obviously so much more than that, because you could have stats that were higher than the average and you were still rejected. So you want to think about, you know, your background, the story that you told. You could have somebody else read, you know, the essays you submitted. Sometimes, you know, you're the only person that's done it. There might be something in there that, you know, there is an issue with. And if you are planning to apply, it could have been an interview, or, you know, there could have been other factors. But again, trying to understand the reason behind that. If you feel that, you know, after doing all that analysis, even getting, you know, somebody like from Fortuna, we sometimes will kind of do an analysis. After getting that kind of feedback, if you still are, you know, a strong applicant, or there is an area that you can work on improving, then you want to focus on improving it. You don't want to apply right away. If you applied towards the end and, you know, you're saying I'm going to apply a few months from now, you want to address whatever that weakness was. So if it was your GMAT score, you want to make sure you focus on improving that. If it was that you didn't highlight something, or your story wasn't, your narrative wasn't as strong as it could be, what can you do to work on improving that, because the school is going to look at your application from the prior year and your new application and see what have they done to improve since the prior application.
Yeah, good point.
Some schools, UCLA Anderson did this, I don't think all schools do, but some schools actually will schedule feedback sessions for a limited amount of time during the summer, or when we're not on the road. And so check and see if the schools that, if you're not admitted to those schools, see if they might do some feedback sessions. Sometimes if you just talk with an admissions officer, they might do some informal feedback for you as well. I've seen a number of candidates who were really strong, but the timing was just off. They applied in round 3, and it's just quite competitive to get in. And so I would advise those candidates, maybe if you apply earlier, next year in round 1, definitely no later than round 2, then you can definitely be more competitive. So just to solicit maybe some feedback. And then also think about the timing as well. So if you applied in round 3 and you were not admitted, then I would not advise applying again in round 3 the next year.
Right. Okay, good. We have a question here. Are the chances of getting a scholarship or a number of scholarships in round 2 as good as they are in round 1?
That, I would say that is highly school dependent, because every different school has a different way that they, different deadlines for different kinds of scholarships, need-based and academic merit, and that should be, if scholarships are important to you, that should be part of that school research that you do. So you should know when you need to apply for each school for the scholarships that you think you'll be eligible for. There is no hard and fast rule.
Yeah. Now, typically, my understanding is that if you want a scholarship, certainly don't apply in the 3rd round for sure, but the round 2 is perfectly okay. That's my sense of it, because after all, the bulk of applications come in, and I think most admissions committees do not want to exhaust all their incentive money in round 1.
Mm-hmm.
Although, the general theory is, and I'd like to hear what you guys say, that, in round 1 you have the real go-getters, some of the best applicants in any round who apply, and there may be this sense that you want to, if you really want them, you're going to throw cash at them. Which, is it really true the best applicants overall come in round 1 or not?
Well, I mean, it's really not dissimilar to just applying, right? It's a very similar way of thinking about it. So it's some schools, not all schools, offer spot scholarships. I know that when we were at LBS, we definitely did. So we offered some scholarships along with offers to people that we felt were particularly strong. I don't know if they still do that, but that's certainly what we did when I was there. And when that pot of money is gone, it's gone. So, but there was other scholarships that were kind of, that you could apply for separately and had their own deadlines, and they required a separate application process. So I don't know if that helps you, John, but that's what I would say.
Sure. Well, hopefully it helps the person in our audience who asked the question. So concerning recommendations and giving them, we have a question, which is all the information. For career switchers, it might be difficult to mention to your supervisor, that you want to switch careers, meaning I'm going to quit, I'm out of here, I'm going to business school, and I'm never coming back. Especially when they've invested a lot of time in you, which is often the case. Would you recommend mentioning that in your application if you can't get maybe a recommender who knows you really well at work, but because you just, it just won't work out for you? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I do think you need to look at, some of the schools do require, your supervisor, and so if you're not going to approach your supervisor, I mean, that certainly does happen, and I can understand the concern there, then you need to certainly address that, and I think typically, the school will say, if it's not your supervisor, we need to know why it's not your supervisor. I think if you're not going to go with someone who has been supervising you directly, you really need to be careful about who you do choose, because I think a lot of these questions in the recommendation form are geared towards someone who has been managing you, so comparing you to other applicants in similar roles, constructive feedback. Those types of things don't necessarily happen in a volunteer setting. Even though you may know somebody very well and they could speak to you personally, they're going to have a harder time addressing some of the professional skill sets and how you compare. So I understand that is something you have to think through, and it's an important decision, and practicing that conversation if you do decide to go to your supervisor, so that you're as prepared as possible and explain it in a way that salvages that relationship and maintains that relationship. Hopefully that helps.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And again, I'll just point out, you don't pick a recommender at the last minute. This is a relationship you cultivate over a long period of time, so that you have the kind of relationship that allows for a complete open conversation about what you want to do with your life and your career, so it doesn't come as a complete total shock to someone that you're all of a sudden going to apply to business school and you're out of there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So here's another question, although I think we kind of addressed this, but it's possible that the member in the audience came in after we did, which is this. How can you differentiate yourself if you didn't apply in round one and your top target school is, a UCLA and NYU? Anybody? I know.
I would say it's probably the same strategy across the board, regardless of what tier school or what school it is. I think you ultimately want to put together the strongest application possible. You want to be able to showcase your strengths and how you're going to enhance the class, show that you're focused, you know what you want to do with your career immediately after business school and in the long run. Show that you're genuinely interested in the schools, you've done your research, you've gone beyond just surface level knowledge of the program, and maybe some people might think that's okay. I looked at the website and I know what clubs are available. I know what the resources are, but it's really not enough. You really need to go deeper. Pull out and put in information that you can only glean from talking to people, from really getting to know the school, not just from doing some surface level online research or whatnot. So I don't think that there's really any differences, when you're looking to differentiate your school. It's all about being well-rounded, about taking your time, investing the time to put together the strongest application that you can, and really understanding each school's kind of strengths, their uniqueness, their cultures, and showcasing how you're a really good fit with that school and why genuinely you really want to be a part of that program, what you can, and how it's going to really enhance yourself as well as your future peers.
So Jessica, you said one thing I just want to re-emphasize to everyone out there, which is this. Admissions officers really want to know what will you in fact contribute in a class, and how will what you contribute differs from some of the other people in the class. So in crafting an ideal different viewpoints and the diversity of perspectives, it's extremely important for them to get a feel for how your contribution in the class and in the community will differ from other people. And that's probably a hard thing to do, because you're probably like a lot of other people in the applicant pool, given what cohort you're in, if you're a consultant, an investment banker, someone from social enterprise or whatever. But that's a really important thing to do, and I've heard one admissions officer after another make that point, and it can get often lost in the laundry list of things you're trying to achieve to make the best application. So here's a really good question, and I think this is a question that everybody has about recommenders. Are alumni recommenders better than any other recommenders? Do they carry special weight? Should you go out of your way to make sure you have an alum write a recommendation for you or not? Who wants to take that?
I'll take that one. Yeah, so I will start off by saying what's most important when it comes to your recommenders is that you're choosing individuals that you've worked with very closely, who know you really well, and who can provide concrete examples about you. So if one of your direct managers happens to be an alum from the school which you're applying to, that's amazing. That's a great situation. But don't seek out a recommender just because they went to the school you're applying to if they're not the best person to be writing your recommendation. Again, it was very clear from reading recommendations when we would read, if somebody asked somebody who had what they thought was an important title or an alum from the school, and it was clear that they just knew them on a surface level, and that did not help at all. But in the case where if you have worked very closely with an alum from that school, that's great, because hopefully you've also had in-depth conversations with them about that program, and they themselves feel that you would be a good fit there because they might be able to incorporate that into the recommendation.
Okay, let me ask a fun question, just because I'm going to be mischievous this morning. And it is in the morning because I'm in the Bay Area in San Francisco. So if I can get a recommendation for Donald Trump from him right now, and I'm an active MBA applicant, should I or should I not? Cassandra, you're on the other side of the pond. It may be safer for you to answer that question.
All anybody wants to talk to me about here right now is the American elections. I'm going to go with the following. If you've worked really closely with Donald Trump, if you feel that Donald Trump knows you, knows your strengths, thinks you're amazing, then by all means, if you have a special connection with Donald Trump, have him write your recommendation. But the same same as what Dina said. If the most important thing is that it's somebody who knows you well, who can speak to your competencies, who has legitimacy with the admissions committee. So somebody who's in business and understands that. And Donald Trump is a particularly controversial subject, I realize, but it's, a lot of times we would see people not just have recommendations from an alum of the school, but somebody that was in public office or was very high up in the organization, but didn't have much to say about and it doesn't add to your application in that case. So
Right.
we really are trying to understand. Try to understand the applicant, and we need that introspection, we need that insight. So,
and I just want to add that he should write, make sure that even if he knows you very well, that it'll be a positive recommendation, because it could be from someone really cool like Donald Trump in the news, but if it's not necessary, if you're not sure it's going to be all positive, then maybe refer to somebody else.
Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing. It's surprising how often recommenders say slightly negative things about the people they recommend. I mean, I have sat as a fly on a wall in a few admissions committee meetings at different schools where recommendation letters have been read, and it's shocking actually what some people recommend. So this goes in that relationship over a period of time to ensure that there are no surprises.
Mm-hmm.
So we have less than 10 minutes left. So if anyone has another question to ask, we're happy to answer it. But I'm going to ask one of my own, which is this. Is there even such a thing as a strategy for round 3, or are you literally just tossing it off? It's like a Hail Mary pass at the last minute. Maybe it hits, maybe it doesn't. Is there really a strategy for the 3rd round or the 4th round in Dina's case?
The truth is the strategy in all rounds remains the same, right? Do your research, make your application the strongest it can possibly be, understand your strengths, understand what you have to give and get from the community, build a narrative throughout your application. I would say that as you go further along in the year, think about plan Bs as well. Do you want to apply in rounds 3 or 4, or do you want to potentially look at a school with a January intake, or push it off to the next year? Because you are, in round 3, the competition is pretty tough in round 3. So start to maybe ask yourself those questions.
And we have a little, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, just keep in mind for round 3, at this point, the majority of the seats have been filled. There's very few spots available. There are spots available. Admissions committees do know that some very, high quality applicants do apply. But, if you're a standout applicant and you have, something exceptional in your background, then, round 3 could be an option for you. But if you're kind of more you don't have anything that particularly stands out, really ask yourself if round 3 makes sense, or if it makes sense to hold off to the next year when it's a fresh class and there are many more seats available.
Now it turns out I may have screwed up an earlier question, so I want to clarify it with all of you, which is this: the person who asked about the recommendation letter coming from the supervisor, that's not the problem. In other words, the supervisor is going to write the recommendation letter, is all on board, but the supervisor doesn't know that the candidate wants to switch careers. So I'm assuming there that then the supervisor thinks, okay, this guy's bought into our life, our way of doing things and what we're doing, and doesn't know about the career switch. Is that a problem? Because that it's possible that the recommender can write a letter that doesn't line up with the application goals of the applicant. So what do you do in that case?
Yeah, I mean, I think in an ideal world it all lines up, right? And
right.
Again, it kind of gets to that relationship. And if this is who is writing your letter of recommendation and knows your strengths and weaknesses and in depth, and yet they're not aware of your longer-term goals, I think that could be a concern. It's just it could cause a question, and ideally you want all of these things to align beautifully. So I would say again, it still gets back to that: is this the right person to write the recommendation, and how do you have that conversation? Because some of the schools that go beyond those 3 standard questions have a where do you see this person long term, and so you want that to align with what you're writing about in your application.
And I'll just add to that too, just keep in mind that whoever's reading your application, they're going to be reading it and looking at everything. They're going to be looking at what you're saying you want to do, what your goals are, then what is your recommender saying about you. So hopefully, if a recommender has no idea and they're writing about completely different skills or strengths that aren't as relevant for what you're writing you want to go in, a different area you want to go into, that could be a red flag, and just something in the story just might not sit right. So personally, I think it's better when you can be upfront with your recommender, explain, and that helps them understand more about why you're doing this, and that will help when they're writing your recommendation letter.
I mean, what I've seen is that when something doesn't line up, it's immediately a problem. And it can be this, it could be anything from what you've done in your career already. Does it really line up or bring you to the logical conclusion about where you want to do, what your goals ultimately are, right? And when there are these discrepancies or these failure to connect the dots, it's a very easy way to reject the candidate, because let's just put it out there, 75% on average, varies from school to school, of every applicant pool is fully qualified to attend, come into the MBA program and do really well. But the acceptance rates are anywhere between 6% and 25% for the schools that we're talking about. So obviously a lot of really good, super incredible people are getting rejected on a regular basis from these programs. So when things don't line up, immediately red flags start going up, which you really need to be concerned about, which is also why I think, again, to just relay the advice that all of you have given here, make sure people read your application before you submit it. And that's one of the wonderful benefits of having a consultant, to make sure that everything does line up, that it's linear, that it's bringing you into the direction that is plausible for you. Because at the end of the day, the question that each one of you asked in that admissions committee room was, can we get this person a job when the program is over? And will they be a happy camper when they graduate? Because if they're not going to be happy and we can't get them a job, obviously this program is not for them, right?
Yep, and people who take the time to do the self-reflection and think about their career goals and articulate those clearly, you are going to do better when they're thrown into that recruitment process very early on in the program. And so, it really does, it helps you stand out, but it will also help you greatly further along, when you get to the school. And we hear that from clients all the time. I'm in a better place than my peers who did not answer these questions before getting to campus.
All right, so let me just remind,
and
Cassandra,
the great thing as well, sorry, yeah, I just wanted to say, I'm very sympathetic to this. What do I do if particularly a lot of people have to work pretty hard to get sponsorship from their current company, or even just sponsorship in terms of time off or whatever it might be. And so one of the ways that it's helpful to work with somebody is that we can help you. Not everybody needs to have, I'm going to do this one thing, right? I mean, I'm working with a client now who is in this exact same situation. He wants to explore a career path, but he's also working hard to secure sponsorship from his current company. And so we've been able to align those things in his recommendations and say, I'm very proud to have received the sponsorship. This is certainly an option for me to return back. I'm also looking forward to exploring career opportunities here, and it all fits in one narrative. So I don't want people to think that it's all or nothing, or they need to be inauthentic or disingenuous, because sometimes people are grappling with one or two things, and that's okay to have in their applications as well.
Great. Well, our time is up. Let me just tell our audience, thanks for joining us. If you have any additional questions, you can email them to Fortuna at any time, either now, tomorrow, the next day, or when you're trying to fill out your application over the weekend and you're saying, oh my God, I'm stumped about this or that. And just a word about Fortuna, because I'm pretty familiar with the firm. The differentiation with the firm is that they hire people who were in the game, in the admissions office, who actually read applications, have assessed them, and made application decisions. So, in their case, you're going to get a consultant who really knows the inside skinny and can help guide you through the process. So Dina, thank you. Jessica, thank you. Catherine, thank you. And Cassandra, thank you very much for joining us from London. And to all of you, good luck on your road to business school.